Company command! This is first platoon! We've lost the square! We can't hold it!
I didn't watch much of the Game Awards on Thursday. There's usually hours upon hours of filler and maybe like 5 minutes of stuff I actually care about. I was really only there to see the Warrior Priest get announced from Vermintide 2, and maybe catch a whiff of Mortal Kombat 12, which didn't end up happening. But I don't know, maybe halfway through, I saw a 40k trailer pop up, and I kind of got excited. I knew it wasn't Darktide news because there was none planned. I saw Ultra Smurf slicing up some nids, and I allowed myself maybe a single moment of hype, but I steeled myself for the worst, that this was some shitty mobile game nobody cares about with all its budget spent on the trailer. After all, an open heart is like a fortress with its gates unbarred and unguarded. We've seen it happen so many times in the past, a badass 40k trailer that has absolutely nothing to do with the final product. But then I saw our Primaris protagonist reach for his helmet. He hadn't even taken it off yet. We're still looking at the back of his dome, really, but it was at that point I knew Space Marine 2 was here. The Prodigal Son returns, the lost sequel 10 years on, and at that point, I could finally breathe a sigh of relief and let the hype flow freely. So what I want to do today is point out some of the details from the trailer and snippets of gameplay we've seen so far, talk a bit about 40k lore, and give my thoughts and impressions on where the series can go and where I want it to go. The original Space Marines game, starring Mark Strong as Captain Titus, launched back in September 6, 2011, and by November of that year had sold 1.2 million copies, which was said to be slightly beyond expectations. Even at the time, though, that was hardly an earth-shattering figure, and that's probably why we waited a decade for the sequel to finally get made. But regardless, it's widely regarded with love and affection by those who played it, and hype around the sequel is definitely gathering some steam now. The success of 40k has only swelled in recent years, leading to community discussion and rumor swirling that Titus might be coming back sooner rather than later. Indeed, that is true. The Ultramarines are front and center once again. Your boy is back, dropping feet first into hell, and the Imperium is once again under threat from the predations of one Hive Fleet Leviathan. The planet you see at the beginning of the trailer is almost certainly an integral component of the Imperium, either due to manpower or resources. You can see the spires of its hive cities poking into the outer reaches of the atmosphere. Probably a cool couple 100 billion people living on a planet like that one, and if the Emperor's Angels are deployed to defend it, alongside regiments of elite guardsmen, then you know it's a location that holds a ton of strategic value, and it must not fall into the Nid's hands. Now, as the dropships descend, garbled communications give you a taste of the threat that awaits below, and evokes that feeling of dread akin to the shadow in the warp, that psychic eminence that precedes a Tyranid invasion. The Shadow in the Warp is essentially a latent psychic weapon used to cut off a system from the outside world, blotting out the light from the Astronomicon, blocking interstellar travel, and preventing astropaths and navigators from communicating with the rest of the Imperium. Essentially cuts off all access to the warp wholesale. Now, I don't believe the Shadow interferes with Vox communication in any way. Radio would still work in system, but the Tyranids have plenty of other tools for that task, whether it be destroying towers, satellites, or just blotting out the skies with swarms of gargoyle brood and biospores. So things are bad for the guardsmen down below, and they need some help from the Spice Marine. It shall come in the form of steel rain. Got ourselves some angry Hormagaunts here. Our first look at the Leviathan Nids, and this is a Hive Fleet that has a long history with the Ultramarines. They were the third and largest Tyranid invasion force at the end of Millennium 41, a force of nature that took the galaxy completely by surprise and killed trillions of humans in their opening salvo. Think of the Milky Way galactic plane as a piece of paper lying flat on a table. The tendrils of Hive Fleet Leviathan hit the galaxy from below, like a hand reaching up out of the ground. So yeah, they're a huge problem, a problem so big, Primaris Marines are being sent in to deal with it. The Imperial Guard are being carved apart here, completely overwhelmed, and that's saying a lot because these are experienced, well-trained soldiers. How do I know that? Well, they have purple eyes, which tells us a lot about them. Spoiler alert here, I'm going to talk about the first Heretic by Aaron Dembski Bowden for a second, one of the very best 40k novels, and if you're looking to get into 40k lore, I really can't think of a better book to start with, honestly, because it lays the foundation for everything that happens in the Horus Heresy, and by extension, much of the 40k universe. But again, spoiler warning. From a canon perspective, the very first time the Imperium ever sees these purple eyes is when Lorgar Aurelian visits an unknown planet during the Great Crusade, accompanied by a squad of Custodes. Long story short, a barbarian tribe lives there in the shadow of a large, colorful rift in space, a people steeped in a very strange culture. Though they have technology rivaling Neolithic cavemen in the year 30,000, I mean, they're literally wearing animal pelts and using stone tools, they seem extremely wise and fearless when faced with space marines and primarchs in power armor, flying moon-sized ships around. The reason for that is that they're a tribe connected to the Chaos Gods, and it is on this planet that Lorgar learns of the primordial truth and begins his worship of a new pantheon, forgoing the light of the Emperor forever, which, as I said, eventually kicks off a galactic civil war. Of particular note, though, this tribe is marked by a deep purple set of eyes, which reflect the warp storm hanging above their planet. What is this planet, you ask? Well, it's Cadia, 10 millennia before Cadia becomes Cadia, before it gets torpedoed into oblivion and resettled by the Imperium as the front line in the wars against the Dark Gods, which is one of my favorite 40k tropes. Happens quite a few times in Black Library novels, that an extremely important world during the Great Crusade in 30k is lost to history in the 10,000 years after the Emperor's interment, and is then rediscovered and renamed in the modern timeline. Happens with Ulanor, which later becomes Armageddon, happens with Cadia, happens with quite a few others as well. Adds to that air of mystery and wonder in a universe this expansive. But how does that all tie into purple eyes? Well, the Casterkin, Tempestus, and Guard regiments of Cadia are known for their purple eyes, just like the tribes that came millennia before, because when they look up at the night sky, they can see the Eye of Terror and its chaotic influence pouring forth from the Cadian Gate. That's the avenue through which the armies of chaos leave their warp-charged demon worlds and enter the material plane to invade. So, if you're a Cadian trooper like these guys are, you have to be really good at what you do, or you'll probably get shot by your commissar, because you're literally the front line in the war against chaos. So, it's a really minor, but super cool detail for 40k nerds here that puts into perspective just how devastating this Tyranid invasion truly is. That veteran Cadian troopers are being face-rolled and need Space Marine support if they want to survive. And that support will come in the form of Lieutenant Titus and a squad of Primaris Marines. Now that's big news for a couple reasons. Number one, means that Titus has crossed the Rubicon, undergoing the grueling and potentially lethal transformation from a firstborn Space Marine into an upgraded, hyper-lethal Primaris Marine. This is a devastating operation that quite literally kills you. It's not some small thing you undergo and you're back in the fight. They crack your ribs open, they suppress your enhanced healing and immune system, then they infuse you with a bunch of new organs and metallic muscle fibers to make you an even more potent battlefield weapon. but sometimes the hearts don't restart at the end of the procedure and the Space Marine dies or becomes permanently crippled. Important thing to note here, that while Primaris are physically superior to Firstborn, a lot of them are comparatively kinda newbie and fail where veteran Space Marines would have succeeded because they lacked the experience. So you take a man like Titus, who already has centuries in the Emperor's service, and make him a Primaris, then you're getting the entire package, and he is a serious force to be reckoned with. I mean, he absolutely butchers these nids, dude. Like, hot knife through butter. Slices a gaunt in two. Love that gore, by the way. Really like that. I mean, that's 40k in a nutshell right there. Smears a pack with their bolters. Kneecaps a warrior brood, then pulls its head off with his bare hands like it's some Mortal Kombat fatality. Freaking sick. But the other thing to note here is that he's a lieutenant now, not a captain anymore, which means he's been demoted since the first game. Not really a surprise if you remember his interactions with that dickbag Leandros and how the first game ended up being escorted away by the Inquisition for being resistant to chaos, which is just about the dumbest thing I've ever read. Imagine taking one of your most decorated Space Marines and saying, "Oh wow, you killed a Chaos Lord. Yeah, you're definitely a heretic." That makes sense. Bit of a contrived story arc in my opinion, not really my favorite, but with an Inquisitor seal on his pauldron and being a rank or two lower than he was before, Titus has something to prove now, even after crossing the Rubicon and becoming a Primaris. Devs put a ton of cool details in this trailer. When he takes his helmet off, he has 4 gold studs, meaning he's been in the service of the chapter for roughly 400 years. He had 2 studs in the first game, so it's been at least 2 centuries since the first title, and somehow he hasn't regained his rank in all that time. Not really sure how that's possible, but the Inquisition must really not like him. Final point from the trailer I want to bring up is how deferential the Guardsman becomes when he sees Titus and the boys. Most humans have never seen a Space Marine. Not counting the new waves of Primaris, there may be around 1 million Astartes in the Imperium wholesale, split amongst 1,000 different chapters, roughly 1,000 in each to be compliant with Robot Girly Man and his codex. So 1 million Space Marines plus however many Primaris, not that many, in a galaxy-spanning Imperium with unknown trillions of citizens. That is a kernel of sand on the beach, a drop in the proverbial bucket. These warriors are exceedingly rare, and seeing the Emperor's angels in person, in the flesh, is a gift. Not to mention they just saved his life. So that awe and reverence is really cool to see in the trailer. And then, surprisingly, at the end of this trailer, we see some actual gameplay too. Grav shoot assault-style jetpack, cracking the earth and slamming home from above, huge swarm of nids, an awesome shot of Imperial architecture being brought low, guard regiments and a tank, more melee combat, then a swarm of gargoyle brood breaking the Hive Spire down. Amazing imagery, great looking graphics, meaty sound design, and visceral combat. You'll love to see it. So, if you've been following the channel for a while, you'll know I'm not a newcomer to third-person shooters with steroid-infused protagonists. I've been playing Gears of War since 2008, and I'm pretty goddamn good at it. There's a lot of overlap between Gears and 40k, from the general bleak outlook of the universe to the power armor, orbital bombardments, character designs, and gore, down to the abundance of chainsaw weaponry slicing alien freaks in half. Warhammer Tabletop and novels were a clear source of inspiration for GAU, and the same is true the other way too. Both the original Space Marine back in 2011 and this new sequel have some serious Gears of War vibes with the movement, weight, and location of the camera over your right shoulder. I wouldn't say they're trying to emulate its success or copy its gameplay, but they were certainly influenced heavily by it in the first title, and in fact a sizable portion of the Relic Entertainment team was comprised of devs who had worked on God of War, Far Cry, and Gears of War, and the influence there is readily apparent. Not all of you love Gears of War, of course, but that's a series that has done a lot right in terms of character movement, impact, and visual punch when in melee or just when you're moving around slamming into cover, and quite a lot of it is worth looking at when designing Space Marine 2 because it would carry over so well to 40k. Personally, I would love to see a smooth, well-designed cover system in this sequel. Now you might say that shouldn't be an important feature when you're going up against swarms of Hormagaunts, Warrior Brood, and other melee abominations, but Tyranids still have a plethora of ranged bioforms, many of which I expect to see in this game, and Space Marine armor, while quite powerful, isn't going to save you from all of the acid and potentially lethal bio stuff they'll be shooting your way. So having a good cover system here would be quite useful in a third-person shooter. Lets you see your character better, lets you feel like you're actually interacting with the environment, that your movement has purpose, and you feel much more immersed in the setting when you're actually punching into cover rather than just standing behind it. Being able to mantle over pieces of debris, charge into a wall and have that meaty slam as you nestle into it and take cover behind as you're being shot at, being able to protect yourself from range fire. These are elements that fit with how a Space Marine engages an enemy. Much better than just awkwardly standing there in the open or hugging a wall but not truly interacting with it. The momentum, weight, and impact of a Space Marine are all things that are better exemplified when you have a good cover system. And while I expect the CQB and shooting to be very satisfying because they were great in Game 1, things you do before the killing starts are just as important for giving the player the sense that they're a behemoth in power armor moving with the speed and mass of a vehicle. Certainly hoping for a ton of weapon and visual customization in Space Marine 2. Would love to equip different helmets and styles of power armor with a big variety of weapons and ammo types to choose from. Maybe even an aggressor or Terminator section of the game where we put on even more armor and weapons to deal with a horde of gene stealers or some specific threat. Naturally, would love to see our beloved Primarch in this campaign too, because Robot Girly Man has been awakened at this point in the narrative, and I'm not sure we've ever seen him animated, moving, and killing in video game form before. Would be sick to see a cameo of a Primarch in action, chopping down a Carnifex or Swarmlord, but I'm not even sure this game will only be Tyranids, honestly. Just like in Space Marine 1, I would not be shocked in the slightest if another race shows up, if not on launch day, then at least as a DLC expansion. That race would probably be Chaos, because Chaos was the ultimate antagonist and final act of Space Marine 1. So much that could be done here in terms of enemy types and boss battles. It has me pretty excited. And of course there's the multiplayer component, which is what gives games like this even more longevity in the long run. Space Marine 1 still has a multiplayer community 10 years on, and I imagine that will grow even more now that a sequel's been announced. So hope the devs don't forget about it in Game 2 and give us a robust suite of game modes, armor sets, and chapters to choose from there too. Because a well-designed multiplayer with customization and a ton of weapon variety could potentially add years to the life cycle of the game. Obviously don't want that to come at the expense of a worse campaign, but that wasn't really an issue in the first title. I would hope they can replicate and improve upon that success here as well. So, I am very hyped to see what's in store for Space Marine 2, and once more news and actual gameplay drops, I will be there to cover it because this game's right up my alley, dude, and I'll be very likely making it a part of the channel, provided it doesn't shit the bed and has some good gameplay. Let me know what you guys thought of the announcement and what you would like to see going forward for the series, and I'll see you all in the next video. Indie Pride, signing out for now. Have a good one, guys.